It's time for Brush Street Beat, presented by our friends at McLaren Health Care. Today's guest is Cody Stavenhagen, the Tigers beat writer for The Athletic. Cody, thank you so much for taking the time to join us again today.
Yeah, absolutely, Daniella, anytime.
We're going to talk a little Tigers offseason today. And of course, we have to start with what gaping hole we all kind of see with the Tigers and the fact that they need to hire a new manager. And that really could be happening pretty soon. Al Avila really didn't give us much when he said, when his press conference, when he was talking about who he was thinking to hire, it was kind of an all options are on the table kind of thing. When you look at this, is there anybody that you see as a front runner for this job?
Well, yeah, I mean, Al was pretty forthcoming in saying that AJ Hinch and Alex Cora were absolutely candidates. And I think, if nothing else, that tells you that this manager search probably will go on for a little bit longer. Those two guys are suspended as a result of baseball's sign stealing scandal. They won't be available to interview until after the World Series. We've heard some other names. Ken Rosenthal reported Freddie Gonzalez, former Braves and Marlins manager, as a front runner. There have been, of course, other whispers out there. George Lombard of the Dodgers. Several other names like that. Break it down. I mean, I think your list starts with Hinch and Cora, and you have to address the baggage from the 2017 Astros and assess, is that really what you want? I think we look at AJ. Man, he's a heck of a qualified candidate. A guy who's managed a young team, and kind of built up with them and won the World Series with them, but also has a great background in player development, worked in scouting with the Padres, has worked in a minor league development in the Diamondbacks organization. A wrench got thrown into this thing yesterday, though, when the White Sox fired Rick Renteria. And the White Sox, of course, I think we all know that they're probably a step or two ahead of the Tigers in terms of being ready to contend. So you wonder if suddenly they have first pick. So that might alter your dynamic. Would you turn to an Alex Cora, a guy who also has won the World Series in Boston, but was viewed as a little bit more of a ringleader in that sign stealing scandal? Or would you go just a different direction? Would you go kind of a safer veteran pick in Freddie Gonzalez? Or would you go with an up-and-comer when you see guys like George Lombard, names, a Tiger fan favorite, Don Kelly? I think we do know that this is going to be a pretty exhaustive search. I think the Tigers are going to interview a lot of people. But I think at the end of the day, there are a few experienced names that kind of stand out. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the Tigers make a run at one of those names.
Cody, first of all, it's nice to see you. I've got my fingers crossed that the power will not go out today, as it has the last couple of times when we were supposed to talk. But with that said, I'm really kind of curious. You always hear in sports that we have like transitional coaches or managers, that when the team's really set to contend, they're going to go for the big name, the Billy Martins, aging myself right here. But what I'm kind of interested about, where do you think the Tigers are at this point? Is this going to be another transitional guy, or is Al really want to get the guy that's going to take this team back to the top?
Well, I think that's an interesting question. The timing of this hire is a little strange. I think maybe in an ideal world, Ron Gardenhire manages for another year or two, continues to polish these young guys. You get all the prospects up. They have a year or two of experience under your belt, and then you feel like you're kind of where the White Sox are now, right? Which is ready to win, ready to contend, ready to get in the playoffs. The Tigers, let's be honest, aren't quite there yet. So do you need another bridge type gap? Do you want to hire Freddie Gonzalez for 2 to 3 years and then maybe, bring in someone else after that? Al Avila was pretty clear in that he wanted kind of the manager of the future, someone who's going to be here not just as a 2 or 3 year stopgap, but a guy who can be looked at as the manager for when this team is ready to contend. At least that's kind of how I took it, and of course, that's kind of how you probably have to sell the job to a candidate. But I think the timing is interesting in that you're a little bit in between, where this is a much more attractive and competitive team than when Ron Gardenhire took over a few years ago. But you're not quite the White Sox. You're not quite probably where you hope to see the Tigers in 2022, maybe 2023. So in an ideal world, I mean, again, you come back to AJ Hinch. He took over the Astros in 2015 when they were coming off a not very good season, kind of helped build up this young core. They were actually pretty good that year. And then 2 years later, they win the World Series. So I think that's kind of maybe a blueprint. You can't quite compare this roster to the 2015 or 16 Astros, but I think that's kind of a blueprint maybe for what you want this managerial hire to look like. A guy who can help groom this roster along in the next couple of years, and then very quickly be ready to contend in the postseason and be considered serious contenders going forward. But it does make for an interesting dynamic. I think one of the good things the Tigers have, even with the White Sox job now open, there aren't many managerial openings. You have White Sox, Red Sox, and Tigers. So regardless, you should be able to get a quality candidate. But it's a little bit of another factor the Tigers have to consider is it takes a little bit of a unique personality to both manage a young roster and manage a contender, and you kind of want a manager who can do here in the period of a few years.
Let's switch gears here, Cody, and talk a little bit about the instructional league, because while we're waiting for the hire of a manager, that is what is taking place right now. And we got the rosters for the instructional league last week. What is the importance of the instructional league this year compared to other years?
Yeah, I think that's actually a really interesting topic to hit on, because at least as I understand it, instructional leagues have kind of fallen off in popularity in recent years, mostly given the fact, teams don't want to put added stress, added workloads on their young pitchers. So this year, the dynamic's different, of course, because most of these guys have not played in a competitive setting since March. There are, however, a lot of other dynamics at play in terms of teams are a little bit reluctant to schedule games against opposing clubs right now, especially in the Florida Instructional League where the Tigers play. You have COVID concerns, you have other factors. Health of arms is still another concern because you have guys who haven't played in any sort of organized setting since spring training back in March. As it stands, though, the Tigers do have a tentative schedule that's going to include some games against other clubs. It's going to include some inter-squad games. It's going to include some camp days. It's a pretty important time. The Tigers have 49 players in their camp. That includes guys like Spencer Torkelson and Riley Green, who are at the alternate training site. It includes some other young guys not, had real developmental time since March. So this is a chance for the Tigers to see what these guys look like. I mean, the majority of the 2020 draft class will be there. It'll be kind of their first real look in action. Some other guys who are going to get a chance to get on the field. It's only a few weeks, but in 2020, it's the best developmental time some of these guys will have all year.
Cody, I know we can talk about the instructional league and there's all kinds of things happening, but let's look at, I know the Tigers need, it looks like a first baseman, a second baseman, a corner outfielder, but maybe one thing we're ignoring because we're so psyched up about the young pitching is the Tigers are going to have to shop for a couple of veteran arms, I think, starters, because everybody had limited innings this year. I mean, is that a high priority? Do you think that if you're sitting around and you're thinking, my gosh, the Tigers are getting another couple of starting pitchers, you shouldn't be that surprised?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, Art, and surely something the Tigers front office is still kind of talking about and trying to figure out every day here right now, because there are a lot of questions at play. One is, are we even going to have a 162-game season next year? That's not 100% a given like we might all think. But if it is, there are a lot of innings you have to address. You're going to have young pitchers like Casey Mize, like Tarek Skubal, probably on extremely limited workloads, and the same is going to go for other guys like Matthew Boyd, like Spencer Turnbull. There are going to be pitchers who are going to say that they're at full strength, that they can throw whatever they threw in 2019, if not more. But in terms of a medical standpoint, that's probably not real responsible. At least you have to be prepared to add a couple more veteran starting pitchers. Now, what kind of tier will the Tigers spend on? That's also tough to know. Are we going to see kind of reclamation projects, veteran guys on minor league deals, or could they shell out a few million for kind of some legit quality starters? I'm not sure of the answer to that question. I think a lot depends on some of these other factors that we touched on briefly. How seriously do the Tigers feel they need starting pitching? Do you bring a guy like Daniel Norris back into the rotation? What do you do with a guy like Tyler Alexander? But at the end of the day, I think every team is going to try to bolster its starting pitching depth. And especially with as much as the Tigers are trying to protect their young arms, we're going to see a couple moves here on the pitching front, and it'll be something teams have to sort through all year long.
Cody, one last question for you. You wrote an article for The Athletic kind of going into each prospect that the Red Wings have and what their update is, I guess I could say. Riley Green got some really high praise from Dave Littlefield. Do you think he is probably the prospect that we could see in 2021?
The Tigers, yeah, Riley Green, 2021 might be a little bit early when you consider how young this guy is. That said, he's done nothing but impress since the day he was drafted. He lit it up in summer workouts in Detroit. It sounds like he really carried that on in Toledo. When I talked to Dave Littlefield, he gave good reviews about pretty much every player in the system, but there was one guy he was really effusive about, and that was Riley Green. Littlefield said yesterday again that he thinks Green could move fast through the system. We'll see how it goes. I think 2021 is probably a bit early, given the fact this guy's never hit above Class A, and he actually struggled in his brief stint there in Class A. But it'll be interesting to see where the Tigers start him, assuming we have a normal minor league season, which might be assuming a lot. But you could see starting him maybe in Lakeland, moving him up to Erie very quickly, and then if he has a strong year, could he finish that year in Toledo? Or if the Tigers need outfield help and he's really killing it, could he make a surprise debut? I mean, with this kid, you can't rule anything out. He's shown he has star power. He's shown he has elite talent. But one word of caution, as we've learned from other prospects in the Tigers system, hitting is hard. And when you get to the AAA level, the major league level, hitting is really hard. So I don't think that there's a ton of need to rush Riley Green. Maybe 2022 is a better target date. But then again, if he's tearing it up, I mean, this is a kid that has just made it hard to doubt. As much as you say, let's take it slow, let's take caution. Riley Green kind of keeps throwing all that to the wind just by the level of his talent, how well he's performed.
Cody, I tend to get overly excited about these prospects, and I really wanted you to just say, yes, there's a good chance he'll be here. But okay, I'll be patient. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, Cody. We really appreciate it. We will be talking to you very soon. And another thank you to McLaren Health Care for presenting Brush Street Beat right here on the Word on Woodward.